It took only 72 hours for a single phone call at 4 in the morning to rip away the velvet curtain of my 15-year marriage. My arrogant husband thought he was leaving a boring wife for a thrilling life with my greedy sister, unaware that I had quietly amassed $14.8 million. He walked into his birthday party thinking he was the main character, never suspecting I was about to destroy everything he ever dreamed of. My name is Eleanor, and I never thought the sound of a zipper could physically hurt. But as Damien dragged the metal slider across the teeth of his leather suitcase, the noise sliced through the silence of our Manhattan penthouse like a guillotine blade dropping on 15 years of marriage. It was a sharp, final sound that echoed off the high ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows, signaling the end of a life I had painstakingly built. Damien did not look at me. He was too busy admiring his own reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of the silk shirt I had bought him for his last birthday. He looked energized, vibrant, and completely detached from the wreckage he was creating. "It is not just about love, Eleanor," Damien said, his voice dripping with that condescending tone he usually reserved for waiters or taxi drivers. "It is about resonance. You and I, we just do not vibrate at the same frequency anymore. You are so static." I stood by the kitchen island, wrapping my arms around myself to ward off a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I was wearing an oversized, fraying wool sweater and leggings that had seen better days. My eyes felt heavy, burning with the exhaustion of 3 consecutive all-nighters working for the Bureau of Strategic Research, a dull, gray government agency that Damien believed employed me as a technical editor. In reality, that grayness was a carefully constructed camouflage for the chaos I managed daily. Static, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper, staring at the man who had promised to love me until death. Yes. Static, Damien turned to face me, his eyes bright with a manic sort of energy. "You just exist, Eleanor. You go to your little office, you edit your little manuals, you come home, and you sleep. There is no fire, no passion. Look at Olivia. She is a muse. She is a thinker. She inspires me to create art that matters." Hearing him compare me to my younger sister felt like swallowing broken glass. Olivia, who had never held a job for more than 3 months. Olivia, who borrowed money with the entitlement of a queen and never paid it back. "She is my sister." "Damien," I said, feeling a strange numbness spreading through my chest, replacing the pain. "She is the only one who truly sees me," he scoffed, throwing a pair of Italian loafers into the bag. "She understands that an artist needs chaos and beauty, not spreadsheets and silence. I deserve a life that is extraordinary. And frankly, Eleanor, you are just not enough." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the man I had supported for over a decade. I saw the Savile Row shirt, the expensive haircut I paid for, the confidence that my bank account had purchased. And suddenly, the tears that had been threatening to spill simply evaporated. A cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. I realized in that heartbeat that I did not love this man. I loved the potential I thought he had. I loved the project of him, but the project was a failure, and the man standing before me was a stranger. I walked over to the door and pulled it open. The hallway air was cool against my flushed skin. "Go then," I said, my voice steady and devoid of the pleading tremor he was undoubtedly expecting. "Go find your extraordinary life, Damien, but know this. When you walk out that door, you are walking out of my bank account, my reputation, and my protection." Damien laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Your protection. Oh, Eleanor, you are delusional. You are a government clerk. I am the one who gave you status. Goodbye, Eleanor. Do not wait up." He brushed past me, his suitcase wheels rumbling over the threshold. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the expansive silence of the apartment. I did not collapse. I did not scream. Instead, I walked calmly to the marble counter where my phone lay face down. It vibrated once, a small buzz against the stone. I picked it up and tapped the screen. A notification from my secure email server was waiting. The subject line read, Transfer Confirmation Venture Citadel. I opened it. The numbers were stark black against the white background, a testament to years of sleepless nights and ruthless negotiation. Transfer amount $14,800,000. Status completed. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. Damien thought he was leaving a technical editor who corrected grammar in instruction manuals. He had no idea he had just walked out on Meredith J. Thorne, the anonymous CEO of Shadow Corp, the most ruthless crisis management firm in the country. He thought I was boring. He had no idea that while he was sleeping with my sister, I was closing the sale of my company to a global conglomerate. I looked at the check digit on the screen again. $14,800,000. It was done. The money was mine. The power was mine. And Damien was walking into a war zone without his armor. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach, replacing the space where my heart used to be. I was not going to cry over a man who thought so little of me. Crying was for the weak. Crying was for the old Eleanor. Happy birthday. Damien, I whispered to the empty room. Enjoy the party. While it lasts, I did not need to weep. I needed to plan, to understand why I didn't scream when my husband walked out. You have to understand that I had been trained to be the silent shock absorber since I was a child. In our split-level house in the suburbs of New Jersey, roles were assigned at birth and enforced with a smile. I was the responsible one, the sturdy oak that could weather any storm. Olivia was the fragile orchid, the golden child who needed constant tending and protection. My parents never said they loved her more, but their wallet always voted in her favor. I remember the night of my college graduation clearly. It was supposed to be a celebration of my acceptance into a prestigious master's program. Instead, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table, her hands fluttering nervously. Honey, she had said, avoiding my eyes. We know we promised to help with your tuition, but, well, Olivia is going through a terrible crisis. She feels so lost. We decided she needs a gap year in Europe to find her artistic voice. We are giving her the money. When I tried to protest, my father had simply patted my shoulder with a heavy, dismissive hand. You are strong. Eleanor, you can handle yourself. Olivia, she breaks easily. So I handled myself. I took out loans. I worked nights. I hardened. Then I met Damien. We met at a gallery opening in Brooklyn. He was standing in front of a chaotic abstract painting, waving his hands around as he explained the architecture of negative space to a bored-looking patron. He was everything I wasn't. He was loud, colorful, and seemingly full of passion. I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame, believing that his artistic fire would add color to my grayscale life. I thought his chaos would liberate me. I was wrong. His chaos just became another mess for me to clean up. We married quickly, and the reality of life with a visionary architect set in even faster. Damien refused to take any job that he deemed beneath him. Designing commercial spaces or residential additions was out of the question. I cannot work there. Eleanor, he would shout, pacing our tiny living room. It stifles my creativity. I need to breathe. I need to design monuments, not strip malls. So I breathed for both of us. We moved to an apartment on the Upper West Side because Damien insisted that living in a prestigious zip code was essential for his networking. To pay the rent, I worked 3 shifts. I was a technical writer by day, a tutor by evening, and a freelance editor by night. I was drowning, but Damien was too busy sketching dreamscapes to notice my fatigue. The turning point came 4 years ago. I had taken a freelance gig helping a small tech firm navigate a data breach scandal. I fixed their public image in 48 hours. When they handed me the check, I stared at it for a long time. $20,000. It was more money than Damien had made in 2 years. My first instinct was to run home and show him, to celebrate that we could finally pay off some debt. But then I remembered his fragile ego. I remembered how he sulked for 3 days when I got a promotion at my day job. He would not see this as a victory for us. He would see it as proof of his own failure. So I lied. It is just a bonus. I told him that night, a small one. I put $18,000 into a secret account and used the rest to buy groceries. That was the day the lie began. I realized I was good at crisis management. Better than good. I was a prodigy. I reached out to an old colleague, and together we formed Shadow Corp. We registered it in Chicago to keep it far away from Damien's prying eyes. As Shadow Corp grew, so did the deception. I started making serious money, $10,000 here, $50,000 there. But I could not change our lifestyle too abruptly without raising suspicion. Instead, I started buying him the things he craved, framing them as strokes of luck. I bought him a BMW for his birthday. When his eyes widened at the keys, I smiled effortlessly. My parents sent the money. I lied smoothie. They wanted to make up for missing Christmas. He didn't even question it. He didn't call them to thank them. He just took the keys. Later, it was a vintage Rolex. I found it at an estate sale. I told him as he clasped it around his wrist. The seller did not know what he had. I got it for 90% off. You are a wizard. He had beamed, admiring the watch, never once wondering how his technical writer wife had thousands of dollars in cash to drop at an estate sale. He accepted the luxury because he believed he was entitled to it. He believed the universe owed him these things. But the moment that sealed his fate happened 6 months ago. We were arguing about his refusal to attend my office holiday party. He called my colleagues drones. You should be grateful I had snapped, a rare moment of anger breaking through. My boring job pays for this apartment. Damien. He stopped and looked at me with a soft, pitying smile that made my blood run cold. I know. He said, reaching out to touch my cheek, and I am grateful. Really, I am the lucky one. I am the only guy I know who has a wife practical enough to keep him safe while he chases the stars. I looked down at the simple gold band on my finger. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as insurance. I wasn't his lover. I was his safety net. I realized then that the ring wasn't a symbol of connection. It was an anchor. And an anchor only has one purpose, to hold a ship in place so it doesn't drift away. But I was done being heavy. I was done being the rock. If he wanted to chase the stars, I was going to let him go. And I was going to make sure he realized that gravity is a very expensive thing to lose. The shift in our dynamic did not happen overnight. It was a slow, creeping invasion, like mold spreading behind wallpaper. Olivia began appearing at our penthouse with alarming frequency, always arriving just as Damien was pouring his evening scotch. She would perch on the arm of his leather chair, looking at him with wide, adoring eyes while I was in the kitchen reheating dinner. You are so unappreciated, Damien, Olivia would coo, tracing the rim of his glass with a manicured finger. Your vision it is transcendent. I do not know how you live with someone so grounded. She would turn to look at me then, her gaze sliding greedily over the expensive appliances and the designer furniture I had purchased. It was not admiration in her eyes. It was hunger. She would touch the silk curtains and the crystal vases as if she were mentally pricing them at a pawn shop. Then came the paper trail. I was organizing our tax documents when I found a hotel receipt from the Ritz-Carlton in Boston. Damien had told me he was attending a weekend seminar on brutalist architecture. The receipt listed a double occupancy room and room service for 2 champagne, strawberries, and 2 lobster rolls. It was paid for with an Amex card I did not recognize, but when I looked closer, I saw the frequent flyer number attached to the booking. It was mine. He had used my miles to upgrade their room. The humiliation reached its peak at Damien's birthday party last year. I had organized an elegant dinner at our home for 20 of his friends. I wore a simple black dress, trying to fade into the background as usual. Then Olivia walked in. She was wearing a floor-length white lace gown that looked disturbingly like a wedding dress. Damien did not scold her. He beamed. He wrapped an arm around her waist and raised his glass to the room. "To Olivia," he announced, his cheeks flushed with wine. The only person who truly understands the torture of the artistic soul. "And to Eleanor, of course, my little bookkeeper. She keeps the lights on while we dream." The room laughed. I stood there, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres, feeling my face burn. I was not his wife in that moment. I was the staff. 2 days later, the suspicion hardened into a weapon. I was sorting the laundry when I pulled a silk handkerchief out of Damien's blazer pocket. It was not his style. It was embroidered with a delicate cursive O, and right in the center of the fabric, like a bloody thumbprint, was a smear of lipstick, cherry red, Olivia's signature shade since she was 16. I waited for him to come home. When he walked in, tossing his keys on the console, I held up the cloth. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain calm. Damien glanced at it and let out a weary sigh, as if I were a child presenting a finger painting. "Oh, for God's sake, Eleanor," he groaned, rubbing his temples. You are so petty." Olivia was crying. "She is going through a hard time." I comforted her. "That is what family does." "You comforted her with your mouth," I snapped. He stepped closer, looming over me. "You are jealous," he spat. "You are jealous of her freedom. You are jealous of her spirit. You need to focus on your boring little job and stop trying to suffocate me with your insecurities. It is exhausting." He walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway with the stained cloth in my hand. That was the moment the sadness died. The next morning, I did not call a marriage counselor. I called Vance, a shark of a lawyer I knew from my crisis management network. Vance put me in touch with a private investigator named Russo. "I do not want a divorce yet." I told Russo over the phone, "I want ammunition. I want a financial autopsy." 3 weeks later, a thick manila envelope arrived at my office. I sat alone at my desk and opened it. The report was devastatingly thorough. Russo had tracked the money. Damien had been systematically draining our joint emergency savings account, the one I funded to keep up appearances. He was not just spending it on dinners. He was withdrawing cash in amounts of $500 or $800, then buying untraceable Visa gift cards. Those cards were being used to pay the rent on a studio apartment in Hoboken. The lease was in Olivia's name. I stared at the bank statements. I saw the dates. I saw the amounts. He was stealing my money to house his mistress, who happened to be my sister. I did not cry. I reached for my red pen. I began to underline the figures, calculating the total sum of his theft. The betrayal was no longer an emotional wound. It was a balance sheet. And in my world, when someone owes you a debt, you collect. I realized then that Damien and Olivia were not just traitors. They were a liability I was about to liquidate. I flew to San Diego the next morning on a red-eye flight, my eyes gritty but my mind razor sharp. I needed to see Vance in person. Vance was not just a lawyer. He was a shark in a tailored suit who specialized in asset protection for the ultra-wealthy. He operated out of a glass-walled office overlooking the Pacific, a setting as cold and imposing as the man himself. I sat across from him, sliding the file Russo had given me across the mahogany desk. Vance barely glanced at it. He was more interested in the document he was holding, our post-nuptial agreement. "You know, Eleanor," Vance said, a dry smile touching his lips as he tapped the paper. Most men read these before signing. But Damien, he was so terrified of your little business venture failing and dragging him into debt that he did not just sign, he practically sprinted to the notary. I nodded. 5 years ago, when I officially incorporated Shadow Corp, I had told Damien it was a risky consulting gig with high liability insurance premiums. He had panicked. He insisted on a post-nup to keep his assets, which were mostly my assets anyway, safe from my potential bankruptcy. So the clause holds, I asked. It is ironclad. Vance confirmed, leaning back. Clause 17, Section B, explicitly states that Damien waives any and all claim to equity, revenue, or future valuation of the entity known as Shadow Corp in exchange for total immunity from its debts. He signed away his rights to what is the current valuation, $28 million, and the liquid cash from the buyout. I added, $14.8 million. It is all yours, Vance said. Legally. He cannot touch a dime. Now, about the joint accounts. We spent the next 2 hours dismantling my financial connection to my husband. I authorized the transfer of every cent from my secret investment accounts into a blind offshore trust in the Cayman Islands. It was a black box. Once the money was in, not even a court order in New York could easily pry it out. I left exactly $2,000 in our visible joint checking account, enough to pay the electric bill, but not enough to hire a divorce attorney. Then came the offensive strike. Vance drafted an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order on our assets. We are freezing the joint accounts based on dissipation of marital assets for the purpose of adultery, Vance explained, his pen scratching across the legal pad. Since we have proof he spent marital funds on Olivia's apartment in Hoboken, the judge will lock him out of the accounts pending a hearing. His credit cards will stop working within 24 hours. Perfect, I said. Time it for Friday night. I returned to New York with a plan that was more like a military operation than a breakup. I called Le Chateau, the most pretentious French restaurant in the city, a place where a salad cost $40 and the waiters sneered at you if you mispronounced the wine list. I would like to book the private gold room for a birthday surprise. I told the reservation manager. For this Friday night, I gave them my corporate credit card number to pay the non-refundable deposit of $5,000. As soon as the transaction cleared and the confirmation email pinged in my inbox, I logged into my banking app and canceled the card. The deposit was paid, the trap was set, and the financial bridge behind me was burned. The next 2 nights were spent in my home office, but I was not working for the bureau. I was building a PowerPoint presentation. I scanned every receipt Russo had found. I created pie charts showing the percentage of our income spent on Damien's image versus our actual needs. I even made a line graph titled, "The Depreciation of My Patience." Then, I added the final dagger. Russo had bugged the studio apartment in Hoboken. He had sent me an audio file just hours ago. I opened the presentation software and embedded the sound clip into the final slide. I put on my headphones to test it, and Olivia's voice, shrill and mocking, filled my ears. "He is such a bore, honestly," Olivia's recorded voice said, followed by the sound of ice clinking in a glass. "But he is a useful stepping stone. Once I get a gallery show, I am dumping him. He is just an old failure. And his bank account is an expiring check." I took off the headphones. My hand was shaking, not from sadness, but from pure adrenaline. On the night of the party, I stood in front of my closet. My fingers brushed past the silk gowns and designer pieces I kept hidden in the back. Instead, I reached for a shapeless navy blue dress made of cheap synthetic fabric. It was 3 years old. Damien hated it. He had once told me I looked like a depressed librarian in it. I zipped it up. It hung loosely on my frame. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun and applied zero makeup. I looked tired. I looked defeated. I looked exactly like the boring, invisible wife Damien thought he was discarding. I stared at myself in the mirror. "Let's go be underwhelming," I whispered. I was ready to play the sacrificial lamb, knowing full well that I was actually the butcher. The text message I sent to Damien at noon was calculated to hit his two weakest points, his greed and his ego. I wrote, "I agree to the divorce. Let's end this amicably. Meet me for a final birthday dinner tonight at Le Chateau. I have a generous financial proposal that will set you up for your new life." I knew he would not come alone. He needed an audience for his victory lap. Damien arrived 20 minutes late, striding into the private gold room like a conquering king returning from a crusade. He was flanked by Olivia, who was clinging to his arm like a decorative vine, and 4 of his sycophantic friends, a group of aspiring critics and failed painters I privately referred to as the art vultures. They were loud, already slightly drunk, and dressed in avant-garde outfits that cost more than my first car. I stood up from the head of the table, smoothing the fabric of my shapeless navy dress. "You made it," I said, keeping my voice flat. Damien walked right up to me, a smug grin stretching across his face. He did not hug me. He patted my shoulder, a gesture so patronizing it made my skin crawl. "I knew you would come around." "Elle," he said, loud enough for the room to hear, I honestly pity you. It must be hard to finally realize that fighting against true love is useless. But I am glad you are being an adult about this. We can still be friends." Distant friends. "Sit down." "Damien," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite me. "Tonight is about you." The vultures descended on the menu. Olivia sat to Damien's right, flipping her hair back to reveal a diamond necklace that glittered aggressively under the chandelier light. I recognized it immediately. It was a Tiffany piece I had seen on a credit card statement 3 days ago, paid for with a cash withdrawal from our joint checking account. She caught me staring at it and smirked, fingering the cold stones. "Do you like it?" she asked, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Damien has such exquisite taste. He said it matched my soul. It is a shame, really, for the people who have to spend their lives earning money instead of actually living." One of the friends, a man with a ridiculous handlebar mustache, laughed raucously. "Cheers to living," he shouted, raising a glass of water. "Let's not toast with water," I said, signaling the sommelier. "Order whatever you want. The sky is the limit tonight. Let's get the 1982 Bordeaux. 2 bottles. No, make it 3. The table cheered. They ordered caviar, truffle risotto, and Wagyu beef. They ate like starving animals who had suddenly found themselves in a palace. Damien was in his element, holding court, telling stories about architectural projects that existed only in his head, while his friends nodded and praised his genius. They mocked my dress. They mocked my silence. They toasted to Damien's liberation from my suffocating practicality. I sat at the end of the table, sipping iced water, watching them gorging themselves on my tab. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a nature documentary about predators who did not realize they had wandered into a trap. "You are not eating?" Ellen or Damien asked, slicing into a steak that cost $200. "Still counting calories or just counting pennies?" "I am saving room," I said, a small, tight smile playing on my lips. "I ordered a special dessert for us all. The chef calls it the exposed lie." Damien laughed, missing the subtext entirely. "You and your dramatic names. Just make sure the financial proposal is as sweet as the dessert." As the waiters cleared the main course, a man in a sharp black suit entered the room. He was the head waiter, but I had tipped him $500 earlier that evening to play a specific role. He carried a velvet-lined box. "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen," the waiter said smoothly. "Le Chateau has a strict new privacy policy for our VIP Gold Room guests to ensure no paparazzi intrusion during the dessert presentation. We require all mobile devices to be secured in this lockbox for the next 30 minutes. "Oh, come on," Olivia whined, reaching for her phone. "I need to Instagram the dessert." "It is house rules," I said softly, locking eyes with her. "Unless you want to leave," Damien waved his hand dismissively. Just put the phones in the box. Olivia, don't ruin the mood. Eleanor is paying. Let's follow the rules. One by one. They dropped their phones into the velvet box. Damien, Olivia, and the vultures surrendered their only connection to the outside world. The waiter locked the box and placed it on a side table, well out of reach. I took a deep breath. They were full, they were drunk, and they were cut off. Lights, please, I said to the waiter. The room plunged into darkness. The laughter died down, replaced by confused murmurs. What is this? Damien's voice called out from the dark. A magic show. Something like that, I replied from the shadows. The projector screen behind me hummed to life, casting a cold blue glow over their bewildered faces. The trap was sprung. The darkness in the room was absolute, save for the low hum of the projector fan. I stood up slowly, the legs of my chair scraping against the floorboards with a deliberate, grating sound. The cold blue light from the screen hit my face, casting long shadows that I knew made me look less like a wife and more like an executioner. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind of stillness that comes right before you pull a trigger. The first slide appeared. It was a stark, black background featuring a silver blade logo that looked sharp enough to cut. Beneath it, the slogan glowed in white Shadow Corp fixing disasters before they happen. What is this? Damien squinted at the screen, a half-eaten piece of bread still clutched in his hand. Is this your new blog, or did you design a website for a plumber? I did not answer. I simply clicked the remote. The slide transitioned to a bar graph. The bars rose aggressively from left to right, a visual staircase of success. The first bar was labeled Year 1, $50,000. The last bar, towering over the others, read Year 4, $6,500,000. That is a revenue chart. Damien, I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the room. Real revenue. Net profit. From what he scoffed, though his voice wavered slightly as he stared at the numbers. Editing manuals. Did you win the lottery? No, I said. From crisis management. For 7 years, while you were busy playing the tortured artist and complaining about the world, I was fixing the biggest scandals in big tech. I am not just a technical editor. My professional name is Meredith J. Thorne. I am the CEO and founder of Shadow Corp. The room went dead silent. Even the vultures stopped chewing their expensive steak. The name Meredith J. Thorne was somewhat famous in business circles, a ghost who cleaned up messes for Fortune 500 companies. Damien looked at me, blinking rapidly, trying to reconcile the woman in the cheap navy dress with the name he had just heard. You? He laughed nervously, looking around for support. You are Meredith Thorne. That is impossible. You buy your clothes at discount stores. You clip coupons. That is how I stayed rich, I replied. And that is how I stayed hidden. I clicked the remote again. The next slide was a scanned copy of a press release from the Wall Street Journal. The headline was bold, black, and unforgiving. Venture Citadel acquires boutique firm, Shadow Corp, for $28 million. The air seemed to be physically sucked out of the room. Damien's face went through a fascinating transformation. The mockery vanished instantly, replaced by confusion. Then, as the number sank in 28 million, his eyes widened, his jaw literally dropped. The greed that washed over his features was so naked it was almost obscene. He looked like a wolf that had just realized the sheep was made of gold. 28 million, he whispered, the number rolling off his tongue like a prayer. Fake, Olivia shrieked, slamming her hand on the table and rattling the wine glasses. She is lying. Look at her dress. She is broke. She is just trying to make you jealous. Damien, it is Photoshop. She probably made this on her laptop in the bathroom. Is it? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen changed to a live screenshot of my personal banking portal, time-stamped for today. The numbers were large and green against the gray background. Available balance $14,842,000. I sold the company 3 days ago, I explained, watching Damien's eyes lock onto the screen like a starving man staring at a feast. After taxes and paying off my partner, this is my cut. It is sitting in an offshore trust right now. It is real, Damien, and it is all mine. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the sound of shifting tectonic plates in Damien's brain. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. He looked at Olivia. And I saw a flash of genuine disgust cross his face as he looked at her cheap jewelry and realized he had traded a diamond mine for a piece of glass. Then, he stood up. He pushed his chair back so hard it nearly tipped over. Tears welled up in his eyes, wet and shimmering in the projector light. They were the most convincing tears I had ever seen him cry. Baby, he choked out, holding his hands open in a gesture of surrender. I knew it. Oh my God, I knew it. I always knew you were special. Why do you think I pushed you so hard? I was trying to motivate you. I knew you had this in you. He took a step toward me, ignoring Olivia's gasp of betrayal. We did it, didn't we? He said, his voice trembling with manufactured emotion. This is us. We are a team. We are husband and wife. We split everything. Right. That is the law. That is love. I looked at him, at the desperation sweating through his expensive shirt. He actually thought he could talk his way into $14 million. A team, I repeated, my voice devoid of warmth. Yes, he cried, wiping a tear, oblivious to the trap snapping shut. I am so proud of you. Let's go home and celebrate. Just us. We can start the life I always promised you. That is an interesting choice of words. Damien, I said, letting his hope hang in the air like a bad smell before crushing it. Because according to the legal documents you insisted on signing 5 years ago, we are not a team. We are two distinct financial entities. I pressed the button on the remote. The banking screenshot vanished, replaced by a high-resolution scan of a legal contract. The header was bold and undeniable, post-nuptial agreement, separation of business assets and liabilities. Do you remember this? I asked, stepping closer to the screen where his signature was blown up to the size of a dinner plate. You were terrified that my little consulting gig would fail. You were so afraid that my potential debt would ruin your credit score that you made Vance draft a clause specifically isolating Shadow Corp from our marital property. Damien's face went pale, the color draining away as if someone had pulled a plug. He stared at the document he had signed with such arrogant confidence years ago. You signed this to protect your assets from me, I said, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You wanted to make sure that if I crashed and burned, you would not get singed. But here is the irony. Damien, by signing this to protect yourself from my failure, you legally protected my success from your greed. Shadow Corp is separate property. The buyout money is separate property. You get nothing. Not a single cent. I did not give him time to recover. I clicked the remote again. The screen shifted to a spreadsheet titled Marital Asset Dissipation Evidence of Infidelity. It was a forensic accounting of his affair, laid out in cold, hard columns. I know about the Ritz-Carlton in Boston, I said, pointing to the first row. I know about the $700 a month in Visa gift cards you bought to pay the rent for Olivia's studio in Hoboken. I know about the $3,000 diamond necklace you put around her neck with money withdrawn from our joint emergency fund. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number, putting it on speaker. Vance, are you there? The voice of my lawyer filled the silent room, crisp and merciless. I am here. Eleanor, the forensic audit is complete. Damien seems to think we are going to split the $14 million, I said, watching Damien's knees actually begin to shake. That is incorrect. Vance's voice boomed. Under the terms of the postnup and New York state law regarding the dissipation of marital assets for the purpose of adultery, Mr. Damien has no claim to the Shadow Corp funds. Furthermore, after calculating the funds he misappropriated to support Ms. Olivia, the final settlement calculation shows a deficit. Mr. Damien actually owes you $4,000. Damien slumped back into his chair, looking as if he had been physically struck. Olivia stood up so fast her chair fell over backward. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. But it was not the cry of a victim. It was the tantrum of a child who had been caught. You are sick, she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You spied on us. You tracked his spending. That is illegal. That is stalking. You are the crazy one, not us. How could you be so calculating? It is called due diligence. Olivia, I replied calmly. And it is only stalking if you are wrong. I was right. I turned my gaze to the other side of the table, where the art vultures were sitting in stunned silence. They had been laughing at my dress 10 minutes ago. Now, they looked like deer in headlights. And as for you lot, I said, clicking the remote one more time. A new list appeared. It was a compilation of invoices. You all think Damien is this great patron of the arts? I said, walking slowly around the table. But do you know who paid for the catering at your failed gallery opening last fall? Marcus, I did. Do you know who covered the insurance premium for your vintage Porsche when you could not make the payment? Julian, I did. Damien used my money to buy your friendship. He has been subsidizing your lifestyles with my paycheck for years. The man with the handlebar mustache looked down at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. The woman next to him slowly put down her fork. They realized suddenly that the free ride was over. And just so we are clear, I continued, turning back to Damien, who was now holding his head in his hands. I have already taken the liberty of severing all financial ties. As of this morning, every joint credit card has been canceled. The debit cards are frozen. Damien looked up, his eyes wide with panic. But how will I get home? My Uber account is linked to that card. That is a problem for you to solve. I said, oh, and one more thing. The lease on the Audi, I canceled it. The dealership sent a tow truck to the valet stand about 20 minutes ago. You might want to check if your car is still there. You took my car, Damien whispered, his voice cracking. It was never your car. Damien, I corrected him. It was a lease in my name, just like the apartment. I spoke to the landlord yesterday. I paid the lease break fee. You have 48 hours to vacate the penthouse before the locks are changed. Damien looked around the room, frantic, searching for an exit that did not exist. He looked at Olivia, who was sobbing into her napkin. He looked at his friends, who were already inching their chairs away from him. Eleanor, please, he stammered, his voice reduced to a pathetic whine. I cannot do this. I have no money. I have nowhere to go. I am an artist. I am not built for poverty. I do not know how to survive without support. Then I suggest you learn, I said, looking at him with zero sympathy. Because the scholarship has been revoked, but I am not done yet, I said, my voice soft but carrying a weight that made the room vibrate. I have taken your money, Damien. I have taken your pride, but there is one last thing I need to take, your illusion. Damien was breathing hard, his face a mask of sweat and panic, but he looked up at me. He looked like a man drowning who had just been thrown a cinder block instead of a life preserver. And finally, I continued, gesturing to the screen where the audio file icon was pulsing. I want to give you a gift from your muse. The woman you said is the only one who truly understands your artistic soul. The woman who vibrates at your frequency. I pressed the play button. The sound of clinking glass filled the room, followed by the ambient noise of a busy cafe. Then, Olivia's voice cut through the air, sharp and distinct. It was not the cooing, seductive voice she used around Damien. It was the voice she used when she was complaining to our mother about not having enough money for shoes. God, he is exhausting, the recording of Olivia said. He thinks he is some kind of genius, but honestly, he is just a stepping stone. An old, soft stepping stone. In the room, the real Olivia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Damien froze, his eyes darting between the speakers and the woman sitting next to him. The recording continued. I mean, have you seen the way he dresses? He tries so hard to be young. It is embarrassing. He is just a balding pseudo-intellectual who likes to hear himself talk. But I can tolerate the speeches as long as the check's clear. Once I get the settlement money from his divorce, I am dumping him. I am not going to waste my prime years nursing an ego that big with a wallet that small. The silence that followed the recording was deafening. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off, before the screaming starts. Then, Damien screamed, "You..." He choked out, his face turning a violent shade of purple. He spun toward Olivia. "You called me a stepping stone, a balding pseudo-intellectual." He slammed his fist onto the table. The force of the blow knocked over a bottle of the 1982 Bordeaux I had ordered. The dark red wine spilled across the white tablecloth, spreading like a fresh arterial wound. Damien, wait, she edited it. It is out of context, Olivia stammered, shrinking back in her chair. Out of context, Damien roared, veins bulging in his neck. You said you were going to dump me. You said you were using me because you are useless, Olivia screamed back, her fear instantly morphing into vicious anger now that the game was up. She stood up, knocking her chair over. Look at you, you are broke. You lied to me, Damien. You acted like you were the king of New York, but you were just living off her allowance. You are a liar and a fraud. I gave you everything, Damien shouted, tears streaming down his face mixed with sweat. I ruined my marriage for you. You ruined it for yourself because you are weak, Olivia spat, her face twisted in ugly triumph. And now you have nothing. No money, no wife, and you definitely do not have me. The alliance of the extraordinary crumbled in seconds. The art vultures, sensing the violence in the air, began to grab their coats, muttering awkward excuses about babysitters and early meetings, fleeing the sinking ship. Damien stood amidst the wreckage of his life. He looked at Olivia, who was sobbing into her napkin. He looked at his friends, who were already inching their chairs away from him. Then, he turned slowly back to me. His arrogance was gone. His pride was gone. All that was left was a pathetic, small man. Elle, he whispered, his voice trembling. He reached a hand out toward me. Elle, please. You see it, do not you? She is a monster. She tricked me. I was seduced. I was a victim here. You cannot leave me with her. Please, baby. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. I looked at him. I searched inside myself for a shred of empathy, a single drop of the love I had carried for 15 years. I found nothing, just a vast, cool emptiness. It is too late. Damien, I said, my voice steady. The divorce papers were filed this morning. You wanted a life of passion. You wanted chaos. You got it. You will have to face the person you chose. The head waiter reappeared, silent and professional, holding a small leather folder. He placed it gently on the table in front of me. I picked it up and opened it. I scanned the itemized list, the vintage wine, the wagyu, the caviar, the truffles. Total. I read aloud, $7,740. I closed the folder and slid it across the wine-stained tablecloth until it rested in front of Damien. Happy birthday, darling, I said, flashing a smile that did not reach my eyes. I canceled my personal credit card the moment I walked into this room, and since the joint accounts are frozen, You will have to pay for this extravagant party yourself. I picked up my purse and turned to leave. Wait! Eleanor Damien lunged for the folder, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his wallet. He pulled out his platinum card, the one linked to the account I had drained, and thrust it at the waiter. Run it. Just run it. I paused at the door. I watched the waiter swipe the card. The machine beeped a harsh, dissonant tone. Declined. The waiter said smoothly. Damien pulled out another card. Try this one. It has a $50,000 limit swipe. Beep. Declined. This is impossible. Damien shrieked, panic rising in his voice like a siren. He looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. Eleanor, do not do this. They will call the police. They will arrest me. I looked at the restaurant manager, who was standing by the door with 2 large security guards. I gave him a small nod. He knew exactly what to do. I had tipped him very well. Keep them here until they pay every penny. I told the manager. Eleanor Damien screamed my name, a sound of pure despair. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out of the room, leaving the noise, the wine, and the wreckage of my marriage behind me. The heavy oak doors of Le Chateau swung shut behind me, muting the chaotic symphony of Damien screaming at the maitre d' and Olivia's shrill, panicked sobbing. I stepped onto the sidewalk and took a deep breath. The night air of New York City usually smelled of exhaust and garbage, but tonight it filled my lungs like pure oxygen. It was the intoxicating scent of absolute freedom. I did not look back. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of the St. Regis Hotel. I checked into the presidential suite, not because I needed the space, but because I could. I collapsed into the king-sized bed, but sleep did not come immediately. It waited until the rest of my life was officially dismantled. At exactly 4 o'clock in the morning, the heavy landline on the bedside table rang. I knew who it was. I had turned my cell phone off, but Olivia knew I always stayed at the St. Regis when I needed to escape. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "LL, are you there?" Olivia's voice was unrecognizable, a jagged mess of hyperventilation and tears. "Oh God, please, please help me. I do not know what to do." "What happened, Olivia?" I asked, my voice calm, leaning back against the plush headboard. "He got arrested. El Damian got arrested," she wailed. "He went crazy when the manager said the cards were declined. Damien tried to run. He grabbed a bottle of expensive wine from a table and tried to smash his way out. The security guards tackled him. The police came and booked him for disorderly conduct, public intoxication, and attempted theft. I felt a corner of my mouth twitch upward. That sounds very undignified for a visionary architect. "It is not funny," Olivia screamed, her voice cracking. "I am at the precinct. They will not let me see him. And the others left me. Marcus, Julian. They all just ran away when the cops showed up. I have no cash. My cards are locked. You have to send a car for me. You have to wire me some money for a hotel. I am scared." I looked at the ceiling, tracing the intricate moldings with my eyes. I remembered how she had looked at me at the dinner, mocking my boring life while wearing jewelry bought with my money. "No," I said simply. "What?" She sounded stunned. "But I am your sister. You cannot leave me on the street in the middle of the night. You told Mom you were a free spirit." "Olivia," I said, my tone as cold as the marble in the bathroom. "You said rules and jobs were for boring people like me. Well, now is your chance to be truly free. Go find a park bench, or call Mom and Dad, but do not call me. I am done cleaning up your messes. Eleanor, you cannot do this. I will die out here. You will survive," I said. "Consider this a lesson in reality. Good night, Olivia. This is consequences." I hung up the phone and unplugged the cord from the wall. I did not go back to sleep. I opened my laptop and composed an encrypted email to Vance. The subject line was Operation Scorched Earth. Vance, I typed. Leak the narrative to the architecture blogs and the gossip columns by morning. I want everyone to know that Damien is not just a broke artist. Frame him as the financial beneficiary who abandoned his CEO wife weeks before she sold her company for $28 million. Make him look like the man who fumbled the biggest bag in New York history. The next few days were a blur of efficiency. The divorce proceedings were brutally fast. Damien, sitting in a jail cell until his arraignment, could not afford a retainer for a decent lawyer. His court-appointed representation was no match for Vance. We stripped him of everything. He signed the papers with a shaking hand, looking 10 years older than he had the week before. I listed the penthouse for sale immediately. I walked through the empty rooms one last time, listening to the echo of my heels on the hardwood floors. Before I left, I placed a single index card on the granite kitchen island, right where Damien used to demand his morning espresso. I wrote, "This house is mine. You were just a guest." I returned to the hotel. I ordered a ribeye steak, medium rare, and a bottle of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon from room service. I sat in the middle of the bed in a silk robe, eating the steak with my fingers and drinking the wine straight from the bottle. For the first time in 15 years, I was not worrying about someone else's ego. I was not calculating someone else's debt. I was just Meredith J. Thorne, and I was worth millions. I lay back against the pillows, closed my eyes, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The judge slammed the gavel down, the sound echoing through the courtroom like the final nail in a coffin. It was over. I gathered my purse, feeling lighter than I had in 15 years. As I walked toward the heavy double doors, Damien stepped into my path. He looked ruined. The arrogant posture that had once dominated rooms was gone, replaced by a slump of defeat. His suit, once tailored and crisp, looked slept in. He looked at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and desperate. "Elle, please," he stammered, his voice cracking. "I made a mistake. I miss you. I really do. I miss your stability." I stopped and looked at him. Even now, at the bitter end, he could not bring himself to say he loved me. He loved what I provided. He loved the safety I offered while he played at being a genius. Stability, I asked, a cold smile touching my lips. "No, Damien, you do not miss me. You miss my wallet. You miss the safety net that lets you fly without fear of falling. But here is the truth you need to hear, the woman you remember. She died the moment you decided she wasn't enough." I walked past him and didn't look back. In the months that followed, I did not just enjoy my wealth, I weaponized it. I publicly launched the Phoenix Project, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to providing aggressive legal and financial aid to women trapped in financially abusive relationships. I wanted to ensure that no other woman would ever have to hide her brilliance just to keep a fragile man comfortable. Every check I signed felt like a victory lap. As for the wreckage I left behind, I let gravity take its course. I heard from a cousin that Olivia was forced to move back in with our parents in New Jersey. She spends her days complaining about how the world has wronged her, slowly draining my parents' retirement fund and driving them mad with her refusal to get a real job. She has become exactly what she feared most, a parasite with no host. Damien fared no better. With his reputation in tatters and his visionary status exposed as a fraud, he couldn't find work in any firm in the city. The last I heard, he was working the counter at a hardware store in Queens. He apparently tells customers he is doing high-level material consulting, but really, he is just mixing paint cans for contractors who don't care about his theories on brutalism. The night before I left New York forever, I sat on the floor of the empty penthouse with a glass of expensive Chardonnay. I realized then that revenge is not a dish best served cold. That is a myth. Revenge is a purification. I had not just punished them. I had scrubbed the grime off my own soul. I had regained my self-respect. And that was worth every single penny of the $14 million. I realized that for years, I had measured my value by my utility. I thought I was worthy because I was useful, because I could fix things. But I was wrong. My value wasn't in my ability to serve, it was in the extraordinary strength I had been forced to hide. I sold everything: the apartment, the furniture, the memories. I bought a historic villa in Sonoma, California, surrounded by 50 acres of rolling vineyards. It was there, among the vines and the golden sunlight, that I met Marcus. Marcus was a winemaker. He had dirt under his fingernails and a laugh that shook his whole body. He didn't care about status, and he certainly didn't need my money. He loved the land, and slowly, he learned to love me. Not because I was useful, but because I was formidable. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset over the valley, he took my hand. "You have a fire inside you, Eleanor," Marcus said softly, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart race. It is truly extraordinary." I looked out at the vineyard, the rows of grapes stretching out like green ribbons. The heavy diamond anchor Damien had given me was long gone, replaced by a simple gold band on my right hand. I smiled, finally accepting the truth. I did not need to be the good woman in their story. I just needed to be the winner in mine. I used to think money could not buy happiness. I whispered to the wind. But I was wrong. Money buys freedom. And freedom is the only road that leads to a happiness that is truly extraordinary. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to chat and share thoughts with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Like the video, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.